Well, hello, friends, and welcome to today's live level up conversation. Whether you're tuning in live or joining me on replay, well, happy Wednesday. It is so wonderful to be here with you. Let's dive right in.
Welcome to Level Up with Winnie Sun, award-winning financial pro. Get ready. Level Up with Winnie Sun.
Well, hello, friends, and happy Wednesday. It is a busy day. For those of you who are brand new to the show, I'm Winnie, your host and award winning financial pro, a Forbes contributor, a CNBC council member, and contributor. And we are streaming here live on many different platforms. So jump in, say hello. We have a very special show for you actually today. For those of you who haven't seen in a week, well, I hope that you're having a good week. I know it's been a rocky one, and last week certainly wasn't for the faint of heart, but a little bit better days today. Let's let you know how the market's doing. The Dow is currently up about 2,300 points. Nasdaq's up about 1,400 points. We'll definitely take it after the last few days. S&P 500 also up about 370 points. Very, very good news. Now, you might be wondering why. Well, you've probably been hearing about, the tariffs are upon us. In fact, I don't know how many people haven't been talking about tariffs. In fact, from teenagers to seniors, everybody in between, I'm hearing all across town with clients in meetings talking about tariffs. And if you didn't know what a tariff was, I'm sure by now you're very clear on how they work. Now, President Trump has declared a 90-day pause on certain tariffs. So that's where a lot of this positivity is coming from, sending, of course, the stock markets soaring after, believe it or not, when we started today, it didn't look this pretty. However, he did increase specific tariffs to China to 125%. That's a whopping 125%. Now, of course, you see the Dow has done well, the Nasdaq, S&P. We're seeing a lot of positivity. A lot of the high-profile technology stocks are leading the rebound here, as well as pharma and retail sectors. They're still volatile, but of course, they're feeling a little bit better. But because of all the tariff uncertainty, you're still seeing this volatility. You're seeing, in fact, just a moment ago, the Dow crossed over the 2,600 mark in the positive. Now it's given back about 300 points here. So I think it's fair to say, and it's very important that you note that there is going to be continued volatility until we get clarity and until Americans and even those outside of our borders that are investing in these financial markets feel a sense of stability and clarity. So it's really sort of a wait and see. We did hear, of course, from many executives from many different companies, including Delta Airlines and JP Morgan. A lot of people have very strong opinions, one way or the other, pertaining to tariffs. By and large, most of what I've been reading, including that from economists, do feel that these tariffs are overdone. But that being said, what we can control is what we're going to talk about, and that is, of course, that to keep things in mind that keep your budgets intact, make sure you have those emergency funds funded, keep your debt low, and keep your spending low as well. But today we have a very special guest. I'm going to segue over because this is going to be this I'm telling you, you're going to have a lot of fun in today's show. We're going to learn a lot today, and actually we're going to build on top of this market positivity because hello everyone. If you haven't been with our show before, sometimes we invest and invite very special guests, and today certainly she's very special. Jennifer Langton, a visionary leader, strategic executive, innovator who has made remarkable impact across multiple industries. In fact, she knows a little bit about what we're talking about today. I say a little bit, of course, I'm discounting that by a large, but she served as chief financial officer of Atari. For those of you who are, you know, old enough to remember, like myself, I was a big fan of Atari back in the day, to leading as senior vice president of innovation at the NFL. Yeah. Jennifer's career is absolutely an inspiring testament to the transformational leadership, innovation, of course, her measurable impact as well. Now, through her new company, JL Inc., she's empowering individuals and organizations to embrace change, for you to lead with purpose and to, of course, drive innovation forward. I mean, talk about the perfect guest for right now. I think we can all agree, not only do we want to be inspired, we want to feel like we're in control, we want to be able to, lead with progress. And I think she's the person to take us to that. She's offering strategic advisory services. And let's go ahead and just say hello. Hi, Jennifer. How are you today?
Good, Winnie. Thank you for the kind introduction.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for making the time. I feel like this is a time where a lot of people are feeling a little, we'll say, maybe they're looking for direction, right? They're looking for some hope, they're looking for some stability. And I think that our conversation today hopefully will help a lot of people with that. I'm going to jump right in, Jennifer. You talked about transformational leadership before we got on air here. I was hoping maybe you could delve into that a little bit. When we know what a transformation is, we know what leadership is, put it all together, what does that look like for you?
Well, transformational leadership to me, it really embodies a commitment. And you said this in the opening, in the introduction, but how to embrace innovation, inspire change, and lead with purpose. And as you know, I started my own venture to speak and consult on just that mission. As you also know, I started my career in finance. Where I really harness the power of emerging technologies to restructure companies and transform businesses. And going back to your point on stability, grounding, what gives us comfort over the years through all the work and my experience, what I had realized was that the top companies are, have an enormous an abundance of intelligence as well as technological advancements. But what we often lack and what we need to truly thrive is human touch and connecting to individuals, which with the landscape and our environment today is exactly the confidence that we are looking for, correct, as you opened in finance and in investment markets. And so when I, in my career, create, these very audacious goals and create change for companies, whether it was for athletes, for businesses, or ambition goals, what was most important, Winnie, is to create transformational change. One, it takes time. Two, you need resources, but the most critical is that you need people. And that is human-centered approach with my leadership style.
Well, I love your leadership stuff. And I love how you talked about human touch, going from like Atari to NFL. I mean, these are very high level positions. And I think for many people who are watching and with us, and maybe even the next generation is saying, like, wow, I want to do what Jennifer has done. And I want sort of that role in the future. And talk about a little bit, let's talk about what you did at Atari, right? A little bit, and then transferring over your skills over to the NFL. How important was human touch in that realm, and is that where sort of this was inspired from?
Well, my leadership style was actually, I'd say the foundation of it was growing up as an athlete, Winnie. And what I mean by that, it's very connection orientated leadership, how to be authentic in your connections, making sure everybody on a team feels seen, valued, and heard. Empowered self-trust, which is finding your voice and finding the comfort in your voice to make audacious asks, to drive teams, to ensure that you are committing to those authentic relationships, to foster that trust so that you can make transformational changes. And also being in my third pillar is continuous growth state and taking either challenges and creating those as transformations. Explaining that when I was young as an athlete, I both blew out my knee my second year playing at the University of Virginia. I was recruited on to the national championship team, but I also lost my mother.
Oh,
And if
wow.
I didn't have the root around me, which was authentic relationships and people caring for me, a self-trust and learning and understanding your confidence and building your voice and continuous growth, that's what gave me the opportunities today to have that inner confidence, to ask for changes in my career, to lead and drive teams as well. And so I've had a very unique journey, and I can start to share with Atari, but it's been very unique.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, I mean, I'm sorry to hear you're injured, but I'm guessing you had a lot of life experience that came from that. Um, I guess I'm curious, working at these large organizations, right? And you talked about having those sort of human relationships and being empathetic and having those connections. When you think it's a lot harder to do it at a company of those sizes versus an organization of maybe 10, 12 employees, like, what does it take, do you think, to truly transform an organization, especially at that size, and its people? Or do you think it just starts small?
Well, it depends on what you're trying to solve for. So I'll start with Atari. And as I said, I've always done emerging technologies to transform business. So in finance, I call it Excel hell. Everybody was always had their data in silos, and you weren't seeing the full breadth of what a business is. So when I was hired at Atari, I actually implemented their financial systems. And in implementing their financial systems, we had one title. You were right, Atari. For those that don't know it, you had your first taste of Pong and Pac-Man, but people don't know the old consoles winning. But there, they didn't have a product P&L. And so you had investment in a title, you had sales and marketing, and nobody was speaking in the form of a product P&L and really driving and transforming that title's growth. And so the financial implementation, what that had done was given transparency into the business. It was the first time that I was able to, for Atari, create a product P&L. I had my voice because I had all of the insights and the data. It was my first opportunity to really work with their board of directors, where we were nearing bankruptcy. But because of the insights that I was able to provide the board, they trusted. We went from a public company to private. Then we went from a production, meaning producing games, to a distribution company. We returned to profitability. And in that, I was able to use my voice to educate the board, but also with the data and the insights that I had was seek their approval for these major restructure changes. I was named CFO at a very young age because they trusted in me, but we returned that business to profitability. Point, if I wasn't able to work with each one of those silo teams, because people are in fear to be open, right? To give the insight to what business unit is doing comparative to another, but it was transparency so we can work together, and we did gain profitability. But it was me educating the board and giving them the insights, and that was gaining their trust to make valid decisions to really transform that business.
I mean, when I'm hearing you speak about this, when I look at your bio, it kind of makes sense. Your skill set and your insight and your ability to work with people from different backgrounds and different styles, I can see why now that your resume actually makes perfect sense. You basically are just a natural born leader, whether you're working with numbers or working with other industries and sports, and with your team background, it all kinds comes into a full circle. So talk about like the NFL now. So I'm sure a lot of people are curious, well, how did she get that role? And what was sort of your motivation from segueing from a more financial role to that role?
Yeah. Well, with emerging technologies, and you can see my need for transformation, always innate leadership skills, but I always had seen things on how to either optimize, bring efficiencies, but then grow. When I was named North American CFO at Atari, I actually applied to a business school. And I really wanted to go back and focus on leadership. However, an opportunity came up at the NFL, and that opportunity was to help them to restructure in finance, to restructure the apparel strategy. So Reebok was on field for 10 years. They wanted to open up those rights and optimize the value for products on field, but through the distribution channels. So again, it was an opportunity for me to use emerging technologies. What do I mean by that? I came in and they were going to send out a paper RFP. It would have taken me and a new team weeks, Winnie, to model this. But I had asked because prior at Viacom, I had built the first SharePoint portal, right? Was there a first website online where you had all of your company metrics? I had asked, could we optimize and streamline this approach, put it on a digital dashboard? And so I built that for them. And what the innovation did was, could you imagine real-time bids, real-time modeling? We increased that business by 200% at the NFL with the likes of Nike and New Era. So I explained that because I always still had a lens of emerging technologies, but there's always a better, new, efficient, and effective way. After 2 years at the NFL, then I did go back to business school. So I had gotten into Columbia and NYU, and I had chose to go to NYU. I really thought that I'd focus on finance at that point, but I was fascinated. I had this new passion for leadership because I was always doing deal flow and then handing off restructures, but then handing it off to the units to then manage the relationships. And that's also what I was very unique and natural at. And so going back, here's where my story gets unique on the transition from finance to an operational role is I asked for it as a woman. You have to ask for it, but you have to align your aspirations with the organization's or the team's goals. Make your vision their vision.
I
So
love that.
given I created after business school and I took advantage of the NFL's talent mobility program at that time, where they offered it to VPs, and say that it was a bit, very business school-esque type A, but I created the Langton roadmap. And what I did was, it was in essence, an internal resume of all that I had accomplished, but not just what I accomplished, but what it delivered, my competencies, but what it delivered to the league, the profits to the business. I had a middle column. It was 3 columns. The middle column was really all of my feedback and reviews, but with constructive criticism, because I was showing them I could do something about it. And in the third column, I asked for my big ass, my blue sky. And that was, as a former athlete that blew out my knee, I wanted the opportunity to rebuild the youth league-wide business plan with health initiatives for players, so that as an athlete, we were either preventing or predicting injuries from happening from them, because it happened for me. I was awarded that opportunity, and I stepped into the role as Senior Vice President of Health and Safety. And from there on, it was an absolute incredible ride. The work that we actually transformed to do, which I'll put a pause, but the work that we actually transformed to do, even in the AI space, was very similar to emerging technologies. But the difference, we needed to solve really complex problems, which every organization right now is in fear of AI, or headlines are saying it's replacing humans. That was not my experience. Here, leadership was building a very diverse team and ensuring that it was human-centered to build what the athlete management teams needed, so they were more effective on managing their athletes. So it was very human-centered, but similar to the way in which I'd always done emerging technologies to transform business, I did the same thing here.
This is
With
incredible,
a
Jennifer.
fabulous team. It's never one, it's always a team.
I don't know, but you are fabulous. And I may just say that I think everybody listening or is like, oh my goodness, Jennifer, I would say like you definitely brought your athlete background, even your coaching background, and talk about transformation. But I love how you decided that you made your vision their vision. I mean, that is beautiful. And not only that, like on paper, you would say, wow, she's already had success at 2 major organizations. And then she decided to go to business school. Like, does she just have extra time? And I'm sure you don't have extra time, but she just decided to do this. And she decided to create her own journey and to just to own it and not worry about like I see an opportunity, I'm gonna go ahead and grab it. Talk about awesomeness all across the board. Now, I want to talk to you about, you mentioned AI, and I think we have to lean into this a little bit. You mentioned how a lot of people are worried now that AI could take may take over your job, right? So a lot of people listening are like, well, I'm in that list. I might be a software engineer. I might be whatever. And you said in your experience, well, with the diversity of your team and whatnot, that this transformation that you experienced, that it didn't really replace all humans. Can you talk a little bit about your vision on AI today?
Yeah, I think, well, first and foremost, AI today should be an empowerment for individuals, not a replacement. And I'm a firm believer in that. And so when we had built and came up with this concept, which was a very audacious goal to prevent and predict injuries for NFL athletes. What we needed first was a technology partner that understood our vision, but also the complexities, because there was not models and or technologies that were looking to achieve and do what we were setting up to do. And so bringing together the right experts was vital. So we had then gone on a road show, selected, and this is when I was at Winnie. This is when I was, leading health and safety, health and innovation at the NFL. But we went on a road show, selected AWS because they really, one, they were the best in cloud experience. They also understood, which is very important to us, and agreed to our vision. And making sure that in any AI, you have to align with your mission and its continuous iterations to ensure your alignment and you're staying on your goal. Second is bringing those various people together. What we were looking to do was quantify body movement and quantify our games so that we can do simulations, what actually causes injury versus what doesn't. And so to be able to do that was to bring together diverse experts, whether that was biomechanical engineers that understood the complexities of biomechanics, but also understood football. It was remarkable to me that having the right experts, not everybody knows what a tackle or a block is or play type within a game. And so when you're building with these vast teams, bringing together diverse experts, but that have subject matter expertise is vital to the concentration, building the infrastructure for success. Next, it was working with the teams. And this is my number one. It gives insights. We had actionable insights that were going to the athlete management teams at each one of the clubs to help them, give them better insights to really drive change and make their work more effective and efficient with managing the athlete. They know the athlete best, but what we were able to do was predictive modeling for every player and give them the data so that they could better do their job. So key and most important, in my opinion, is one, AI will be an empowerment to humans, and you have to focus, what are the humans' needs and challenges, and how can AI help them to either be more efficient, more effective, or grow your business? That is vital to success. And then there's numerous other things, but I do think that number one, putting a human-centered approach and understanding what their needs are so that you can capitalize on enhancing their abilities is first and foremost. And that was always my experience. And that's how we were really transformational and successful.
I love it. I think a lot of leaders and employees listening to this are starting to think, how they can use AI to, like what you mentioned, to enhance human work and not replace it, and then finding how to make things a lot more efficient. And how, I guess, our responsibility as humans and not as AI is finding ways that we can continue to evolve as well, just like you did, going back to business school. I mean, the way that we conduct business and look at AI is certainly going to change, I think, even in the matter of months and years here. So I have to ask you, one thing that we want to talk about is, clearly you've dominated many what you people would consider roles in sort of male dominated spaces in your career. Do you have any advice for women who are looking to do the same that you've done?
Yes, I do. In short note, I just spoke at a healthcare conference for an organization called Ignite, and it was women that were pioneering, transformation and changes in healthcare. And my advice to them was, and which I will share, is one, own your story. Listen to the transformation that I created in my career, but also for an organization like the NFL, which I am so grateful to have those opportunities. But because I honed in on what my aspirations were, and I moved forward with presenting my unique story. And it's not, having diversity in a room, having different perspectives in a room is important, but you showing up with your independent story, who you are, giving your perspective is essential for AI and for transformation. So that is number one, is owning your story. Second, because your story will play forward very uniquely and very differently than anybody else's story. Second, especially for women, is owning your voice. find your voice. And there are multiple different ways where you can get confidence in doing that. I will give you, one story. Is I was asked when I started health and safety, Wendy, to go and speak to the equipment managers. And in speaking to the equipment managers, they are vital, or were vital, to our success because they have the trusted relationship with the athletes. And we were about to transform the helmet marketplace with a $60 million engineering roadmap. I walked into that room and, building, and it's all practice. When you get up and you present finance or to boards, you get your comfort, you have to know your data, you have to know your points, you practice, you always practice what your delivery is going to be. But I've always been one to know in depth. I put in the time to understand so that I can build and educate and present. I walked into this room, I had a Post-it note in my hand with what I needed to convey about the engineering roadmap. And it was one of those experiences, all men. I was about to take the podium, all wearing their caps, absolutely no eye contact. And I'm the sole woman in the room taking that podium. And I remember my nerves spiked. And when my nerves spiked, I knew I had that Post-it note in my hand, but I found my voice. And here's sharing your personal story, because I wanted to read the room. Reading the room I couldn't lose that opportunity because I knew that they were vital to our success. And when I got to the podium, I said to them, "Good morning, gentlemen. As the only girl that played on an all-boys lacrosse team, I want you to know that I feel very comfortable up here, so I got this." And I will never forget that moment, because what I did was I broke that barrier and connected from my story to them in my own way as an athlete. But, their eyes lifted, that, apprehension and it turned to curiosity. And it was like, who is this woman? And what that did, when I found my voice and I had the confidence to give a little bit of my own story, it opened up the communication and that dialogue moving forward. And so would you know that all the testing of the helmets and position-specific helmets, they were so vital to our success. And so building and knowing, right, that I had, yes, the inner confidence, but I needed to connect with them. Owning your voice, making bold asks, and building those meaningful connections, especially for women who second guess themselves, is vital to one's success, but also to the team success, and then the end goal, the operation success. But owning your voice and becoming comfortable with practice takes time. But that is my one advice: own your story and find your voice, because it's very important.
I love that. Own your story, own your voice. And Jennifer, maybe I could ask you, for those who are watching, and you mentioned it's important to practice. What would you suggest that they practice?
That's a really good question. So, I always found that, and it's sometimes what you don't get, then you play forward as a leader. But with my team, when I was at the NFL recently, had somebody, reporting to me, and I would practice her presentations with her. And so when she would get up, it was like that guidance and support I was giving to her was what I needed at that time, and it would accelerate my growth. So give the opportunities as women to practice with others before your pitch. Ask advice. And so that will help you to take the nerves away. And most of the time when we're nervous, we do it on our own, but people will help you. I wanted her to shine, and guess what? She shined. The other thing is, and especially for women, I once had to, I hired a young woman who was such a talent, and she was tapped by her former company to come back. And, when we're pitching for ourselves, Winnie, we get emotional, we're different. And it's like, okay, maybe you're not as clear, you're not as effective. When I had to go in and pitch for her, it was factual. It was very what she delivers, how that helps me to grow, how that helps the organization to grow, and if we lose our A, B, and C. And I said to myself, why don't I do that for myself? It was taking the emotion out. But a reason why I share that is my advice would be pitch for somebody else. Go do something for somebody else so you're building that confidence. Because once you break that emotion or just that hesitation and fear, you're very effective. And that doesn't mean you have to be aggressive. I'm always very polite, but ask for ways and position it where you succeed and the organization succeeds. But it's practice. Practice, then you'll get delivery.
I love that. And that's such an aha moment. You're promoting somebody else and you're very excited and you're sticking to the facts. But then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, if I'm doing this for her, why couldn't I do this for myself? I love that, love that. You've given us so many gems today, Jennifer. So much wisdom. I love it, love it. Let me ask you this before I let you go, of course, is you've given us so many gifts today. What's the best advice that you've been given in your journey from somebody else?
Well, mentors have been a lot to me. I do think that a gentleman, Peter Foss, and I've had multiple different mentors, so it's not, one versus the other, but I will never forget when at the NFL, Peter worked for GE, for Jeff Immelt, and I was in such a new space where here I'm the vice president of health and safety, and I didn't know concussion diagnostics. I didn't know about concussion, but I was eager to learn. And what he said to me at that moment, and it took me, everything's always in hindsight, but he said, be you, because you don't always have to have all the answers.
Mhm.
He was like, they'll trust you if you're committed to it. And I didn't understand that at that time, be me. But what I offered was what they didn't have. And building a team and accelerating that team was what I did. I didn't need to have the right answers. I needed the right people around me. And he saw that talent in me. But when he said, be you and let it shine, I think about that at such a pivotal time in my career where I was taking on new areas and new scopes of work, where I was continuously getting educated, but it was also being vulnerable and a little bit of like, I needed that confidence because I was in a new space. And when he said, be you, it's exactly my advice to women. It's carry your story and play forward what you're good at and have that confidence with your inner voice. And it was one of the best, very subtle advices, but now I have such a clarity to what he meant and how much that was a catalyst for change for me.
I love that. Just be you. And not only will you have more confidence, you'll probably be a lot happier doing what you do because it just feels right. Jennifer, this has been it's just been so amazing. Such a powerful, insightful conversation. Like when just listening to you speak, your journey, it's quite inspiring. I'm thinking many of you who are with us live right now feel the same way. And of course, Jennifer, your work is shaping sort of the future of leadership and innovation. I think it's helping a lot of people, a lot of women across the board who are listening and watching you live today. Now, for those who want to learn more or maybe even want to work with Jennifer and maybe ask her to come speak at your company, where should people go?
So I do have a new website, Jennifer Langton Inc., and my email is langton.jennifer@icloud.com. And
Love
so
it.
you can send me communication and information there, and I will get right back to you. But I'm very
Wonderful.
excited to empower others to embrace innovation, inspire change, but really lead with purpose.
Wonderful. So we'll go ahead and make sure to include the web address that Jennifer shared. And Jennifer, maybe you could send me that email address too. We'll make sure to share that out as well. And thank you so much for being here and spending the time with us. I hope you'll come back, Jennifer, because this was so much fun. I learned so much and I don't know, feel a lot better. And I think, the market certainly didn't help. And speaking of the market, I'm going to jump back to that before we close off. The Dow is currently up 2,800 some points. So the Nasdaq is up 1,759 points. We'll take that for sure. S&P 500 is currently up about 449 points. Hopefully this continues. We've got about 30 minutes left before the market's going to close here. But fingers crossed. Better days ahead. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here and for spending this time with Jennifer and I. Do me a favor and make sure to share this show with someone who could benefit from hearing from Jennifer and learning about her story. I know there's a lot of people out there, so definitely do that. You can tag her. But thank you, Jennifer, for your generosity and for
Thank you
sharing
for
your
having me,
story.
Wendy. Thank you very much.
Oh, you are incredible. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I got to jump, but I hope to see you all very soon. I'm going to actually be going on live CBS local in just a moment. So Maybe you'll see me twice today. Thank you so much, my friends, for being here. Be well, and I'll see you again very soon. Take care now.